So you think you know about the Silk Road? Yeah, right? It's not just a fancy name for a trade route. It's like the ancient version of Amazon, but with camels and a lot more spice. Imagine if you could order spices, silk, and stories from the other side of the world. But it took months and a whole lot of luck. That's the Silk Road in a nutshell. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just about goods. It was a giant, chaotic marketplace where ideas, religions, and diseases all got a free pass. Like a Renaissance fair, but in the middle of the desert. So you're probably wondering, why should I care about a 2,000-year-old trade route? Well, it shaped the world, like a giant, dusty GPS for civilizations, guiding them toward each other. And we're only just scratching the surface. Next, we'll dive into how this crazy marketplace actually worked. But first, let's take a break and grab some snacks because history is better with snacks. Okay, so we're talking about this super ancient marketplace that stretched like a spaghetti noodle across the whole middle of the world. It wasn't just one place, it was like a whole network of trade routes, kind of like a global Instagram feed for goods and ideas. Imagine if you took all the highways and byways from China to Europe, and then threw in a few camel trails and some mountain passes. That's basically what the Silk Road was. It wasn't just silk, it was everything from spices to secrets. But here's the kicker, it wasn't a single marketplace. It was more like a series of towns and cities that acted as middlemen. Think of it as a relay race where each runner passes the baton to the next. But instead of a baton, it's a bag of goods. And guess what? It wasn't just about selling stuff. It was a giant brain network where ideas, religions, and diseases all traveled too. Like a digital marketplace, but with camels and no Wi-Fi. So yeah, we're not just talking about a place. We're talking about a whole system of movement, culture, and connection. And it all started way before your grandparents' grandparents were even born. You think your Amazon cart is wild? Back in the day, people had to ride camels across deserts to get their stuff. It's like the original version of Ship It but with more sand and less Wi-Fi. The Silk Road wasn't just about trade, it was like a global TikTok before TikTok, where ideas, religions, and recipes traveled faster than any influencer could scroll. The Silk Road was basically the first global economy. No borders, no tariffs, just a bunch of people trading stuff and learning how to be better at life. Even though it's been centuries, the Silk Road still shapes your world. Every time you eat, you're eating a little piece of history. That's the kind of legacy that deserves a standing ovation. So yeah, you should care. Not because it's ancient, but because it's still alive in everything you touch. And honestly, it's way cooler than your last dating app. Okay, so imagine a Silk Road was like a giant, never-ending game of tag, but with camels and spices. People were trading stuff from one end of the world to the other like a super long version of Pass the Parcel. It started around 200 BCE, like a kid trying to build a sandcastle but accidentally making a city. The Chinese were the first big players, selling silk, tea, and a whole lot of I'm not gonna lie, this is amazing. By the time the Middle Ages rolled around, it was like a chaotic TikTok trend. Everyone was doing their own thing, but all connected. Merchants, monks, and even spies were all part of the same weird dance. But the Silk Road didn't just trade goods, it traded ideas, religions, and sometimes just plain old weirdness. Like, you could go from a Buddhist temple to a Christian church in one day, and maybe get lost in between. And let's not forget the nomads and traders who were the real OGs. They were the ones keeping everything moving, like the Uber drivers of the ancient world, but with camels and a whole lot of patience. So yeah, the Silk Road was basically the original global marketplace, messy, amazing, and way more interesting than a boring history class. So the Silk Road wasn't just a road. It was like a giant, super long, really busy toy store where people from all over the world came to trade stuff. Imagine if you could walk from your house to the moon, and every step was a new toy shop. But instead of toys, they traded spices, silk, and weird stuff like glass and gold. It was like a global swap meet, but with more camels and fewer kids arguing over Legos. The big idea is that it wasn't just about selling stuff, it was about connecting people, ideas, and even religions. It was like a giant, slow-motion game of telephone, but with more trade and less misunderstanding. So the Silk Road wasn't a single road, it was a whole network of roads, like a giant spider web made of trade routes. Every city was a node, and every node had something to offer. In the end, the Silk Road was about more than trade, it was about sharing. Like when you share your snacks with your friend. But this time it was across thousands of miles and hundreds of years. So, the Silk Road wasn't just a bunch of roads. It was like a giant, ancient marketplace spread across the entire known world. Think of it like a massive, never-ending flea market, but with camels and caravans instead of vendors and hot dogs. To start, you needed a caravan, like a mobile business. You gather up your goods, pack them tight, and hire a bunch of camels because they're basically the Uber of the ancient world. Then you'd need a map, or at least a pretty good guess. The Silk Road wasn't a single road. It was a network of routes, like a giant spaghetti-like web of trade stretching from China to the Mediterranean. You also need some cash, or at least a way to trade. Gold, silver, silk, spices. It was like a swap meet with the best stuff. And trust was key, because you were basically sending your stuff across the world with no GPS. Finally, you need a plan. Like, where are you going? What do you want to sell? And who are you selling to? It was like starting a business, but in a desert, with a lot of camels and no Wi-Fi. So, once the goods are packed, the next step is to get them moving. That's where the real magic happens. Traders start hopping on camels, horses, or boats, and off they go, like a medieval version of a delivery service. But wait, how do they know where to go? Well, they use a mix of maps, stories from other traders, and sometimes just a gut feeling. It's like playing a board game where the rules keep changing. Along the way, they trade with other groups, swapping goods for money or other items. It's a big marketplace in motion, where every stop is like a mini auction with no bid limits. Some traders are just passing through, others are full-time players. There's even a few who get rich and start their own empires, like a modern-day version of a side hustle gone viral. And if things go wrong, well, they just try again. The Silk Road wasn't a straight line, it was a web of routes, with detours, shortcuts, and a few roadblocks. But the traders, they were resilient, like a kid who won't stop until they get that toy. So, in short, the Silk Road was a massive, chaotic, but wildly successful marketplace that worked like a big, messy relay race. Everyone had a role, and the goods kept moving until the end of time, or at least until the next big trade route came along. So, the Silk Road wasn't just a bunch of roads, it was like a giant, ancient marketplace. But here's the twist, it wasn't all about just selling stuff. It was about trust. You see, traders didn't just walk up and hand over their goods. They had to prove they were real, honest people. To keep things fair, they used a system called the haggle and handover. It was like a game of chicken with money. You'd haggle over the price, then hand over the goods and money at the same time, so neither side could cheat the other. But the real trick, they used letters, messengers, and even secret codes to keep track of their stuff. Imagine if you had to send a message in a bottle, but the bottle had a map and a password. That's how they made sure their goods didn't vanish or get stolen in the middle of the journey. And guess what? The Silk Road wasn't just for goods. It was also a place where ideas, religions, and even diseases traveled, like a giant, dusty internet, but with camels and horses instead of Wi-Fi and fiber optic cables. So, in the end, the Silk Road wasn't just about selling stuff. It was about building trust, using clever tricks, and making sure the whole system ran smoothly, like a game of tag, but with trade and travel instead of chasing. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Kindle Paperwhite e-reader. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. So the Silk Road wasn't just a bunch of camels and traders, it was like a massive, ancient Wi-Fi network. All these ideas, religions, and goods were just data packets zipping through the air, carried by people who were basically the original influencers. But here's the kicker. The real magic wasn't the trade itself, it was the people. Like, imagine if your favorite Instagram account was a whole country. Those people were the ones making the content, not just the followers. And let's not forget the science of it all, like, how did they even know where to go? They used stars, maps, and maybe even some ancient GPS called star navigation. It's like having Google Maps but with a compass and a lot of patience. Oh, and the spices? They weren't just for flavor, they were like the original antibiotics. People used them to cure stuff, which is basically like having a medicine cabinet in your spice rack. So yeah, the Silk Road was a mix of trade, travel, and brain power. It was like a renaissance before the Renaissance, with people swapping ideas faster than they could swap goods. And that's the real science behind it all. So imagine the Silk Road like a really long, really busy flea market. Only instead of just clothes and trinkets, it's like a chaotic, cross-cultural swap meet where everyone brings their best stuff. And the best part? No one's keeping track of who brought what, because it's all just one giant, slightly illegal trade party. It's like if you took your favorite garage sale, threw in a few caravans, and then let 1,000 cultures trade, argue, and accidentally invent things. The Silk Road wasn't just a road, it was a giant, ever-growing, slightly mischievous marketplace. You can think of it like a group project where everyone's contributing, but no one's in charge. Some bring spices, some bring ideas, some bring weird stuff they found in the desert. It's like a collaborative art project, but with more camels and less paint. The thing is, this market wasn't controlled by anyone. It was just this huge, informal, slightly chaotic, but incredibly successful place where people could find what they needed, even if they didn't know it was coming from the other side of the world. So yeah, the Silk Road was a marketplace so big, it felt like it was run by a very confused, very busy, but very successful middleman. And honestly, that's kind of how it worked. No rules, just a whole lot of trading, and a few accidental inventions. So here's the thing, the Silk Road wasn't just a bunch of roads, it was a whole marketplace that stretched across continents. It wasn't just goods moving, it was ideas, religions, and even diseases. Imagine a giant, ancient eBay with no Wi-Fi, but way more stuff. People traded not just silk and spices, but also stories. You could buy a map of the world and then sell it to someone else. It was like a global chat room, but with no emojis and way more camels. And here's the kicker, it wasn't just one big market. It was like a chain of little markets, each with their own rules, languages, and sometimes even wars. It was a network, not a single place. Kind of like a big, ancient version of Instagram, but with trade. The best part? You could buy stuff from the other side of the world and then sell it for a profit. It was like a version of the stock market, but with silk and spices, and way more camels. So yeah, the Silk Road wasn't just a bunch of roads. It was a whole ecosystem of trade, culture, and chaos. It's like the internet, but with camels and way slower, but way cooler. Okay, so the first myth is that the Silk Road was all about silk. Yeah, sure, but that's like saying the ocean is all about water. You know, it's the main thing, but there's way more to it. The Silk Road wasn't just for silk. It was like a giant, ancient version of Amazon, but with camels, spices, and weird religions. It's not just one thing, it's a whole bunch of things. People think it was a straight line from China to Rome, but it's more like a spider web. You had trade routes, cultural exchanges, and sometimes even wars. It's not a single path, it's a network. So, the Silk Road was more than just silk. It was a huge, chaotic, and fascinating market that brought people together across the world. And that's the first myth busted. So, here's the thing, some people think the Silk Road was just a bunch of camels carrying spices and silk. But guess what? It wasn't just about stuff. It was about ideas, religions, and even diseases. Like, imagine if your favorite snack was actually a secret weapon for spreading culture. And hey, don't think it was all one-way traffic. Things moved both directions. Like, we got paper from China, but they got paper money from us. It's like a trade-off, but with more silk and less debt. Also, you can't just say Silk Road and think it's a single road. It was more like a network of roads, like a spider web. Some parts were super busy, others were more like dead ends. It's like a really long, complicated internet that didn't use Wi-Fi. And let's not forget the people. It wasn't just about goods and ideas. It was about people moving, too. Think of it like a big, ancient travel blog. People were exchanging stories, languages, and even ways of doing things. It's like a real-life version of a global village. So, to wrap up this myth, the Silk Road wasn't just a road. It wasn't just about stuff. And it wasn't just one way. It was a complex, living network that shaped the world. And yeah, I'm still not sure why they named it after silk. Maybe it's just a fancy name for a really, really long trade route. So, you're sipping your coffee, and suddenly you're in a Silk Road marketplace. You didn't realize it, but you're eating something that traveled 5,000 miles. You're just the final customer in a long, weird, awesome journey. The spices in your curry? They came from India. The tea in your cup? China. The chocolate in your snack? That's a direct descendant of the Silk Road. You're literally eating history. Even your phone? No, not your phone. Wait, your phone is a modern invention. But the Silk Road started the idea of global trade. It's like the original Instagram for goods, but with more camels and less filters. You're buying a t-shirt? Maybe it's made in China, printed in Italy, shipped by a company that's been around since the Roman Empire. That's the Silk Road in your closet. It's like a time machine, but for clothes. So, next time you're at the store, remember, you're not just shopping. You're participating in a 3,000-year-old global marketplace. The Silk Road is alive, and it's in your fridge, your couch, and your Spotify playlist. Okay, so imagine you're in a medieval bazaar, and you're trying to buy a silk scarf. But instead of just haggling, you're actually negotiating with a guy who's trying to sell you a scarf that's made of wool. But he insists it's silk. You're like, bro, I can see the wool. Now, this isn't just a joke. In real history, people would sometimes fake goods to scam travelers. It was like the Silk Road version of I'm not a fan of this place. The scam would work if the traveler didn't know the difference. But if they did, they'd just laugh and say, "You're a real gem, aren't you?" So, in a way, the Silk Road was a giant marketplace, but also a giant game of who's the real fake. It was like if eBay had a medieval vibe and a lot of trust issues, and that's why the Silk Road was so interesting. It wasn't just about trade, it was about deception, culture, and the human need to both scam and be scammed. Before you go, if you enjoyed this, please give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell us in the comments what you'd like us to make next. We read every single one. Thank you so much for watching.